All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're talking college football, and it's finally here. The college football playoff rankings have been announced. We have our 4 matchups going forward into the playoff. We have our New Year's Day 6 games. Fresh and I, we're going to break down those matchups here going into bowl season here, and talking about sometime later on this week, the Army-Navy game, the America's actual game right there. Salute to the armed forces. But my co-host, the man who has been sitting in his apartment in the dark, listening to sad 80s music for probably the last 18 hours and chewing coffee beans. My co-host, Fresh. Fresh, how you doing, buddy?
Perhaps. Kind of a little down if the Dogs lost, but you know what? It happens. They were going to lose eventually at some point. Sucks it happened in that title game, but we got to move on. We have ourselves one heck of a situation in front of us right now. A lot of opinions and results based on the final rankings released by the committee. I think everybody has a completely different, opinion and point of view and way they want to go about it. And it's exactly why we have a 12-team playoff coming. And you know what? Maybe 12 teams is too much. Maybe 8 should be the right number, because you start looking at what the projected 12 would be. It has you sort of questioning some of the matchups, but we'll see what happens next year, and there'll be controversy around that 12th team when we get there, or the 11th team actually, and we'll move on. But football creates chaos, it creates drama, it creates TV and content for all, and that's what we're all here for.
All right, Fresh. So let's start with the playoff here, because that's why people clicked on the link. That's why people are here to listen to us talk. So hey, before we get going here, folks, hit that subscribe button right up there. Hit the notification bell. Get notified every single time we drop a new episode. We're going to be covering all of bowl season. Like I said, we got Army-Navy coming up, and we will do a deep dive into the college football playoff. Right now, we're going to do our initial reaction to what they've announced for the playoff system. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so we get rocking and rolling here. Fresh, you take a look at how the college football playoff committee came out with it. Number 1 overall seed is the University of Michigan. Number 2 is Washington. Number 3 is Texas. And number 4 is Alabama. For those of you who just saw the top 4, didn't know, the Rose Bowl is going to feature Michigan versus Alabama. And the Sugar Bowl is going to be Washington versus Texas and down New Orleans. Much more, Washington is the number 2 team, not getting the benefit there like you're going to get for Texas. Interesting here. Both these games are on New Year's Day, so make sure you guys don't go too hard on New Year's Eve and have to sleep the whole day off for New Year's Day. But those are our 2 matchups. Fresh, before we get into the controversy of everything, let's talk about the 2 matchups here. What was your first reaction when you saw the Rose Bowl come out, and then what did you react with the Sugar Bowl?
Well, I think the most interesting is the number 1 seed gets to pick the location of the game. They get that first preference, first right of refusal, and they chose the Rose Bowl. And the way I kind of look at it is they didn't want to play in the Sugar Bowl with Alabama being closer to New Orleans. They wanted to force them to travel out where they have a chance of maybe a larger crowd, a much stronger Michigan fan base out there to give them more of an advantage, and forcing Alabama fans to make that trip, which I got a feeling they'll be able to, maybe drown them out a little bit more, or have more of a broken up crowd. Strategically, I agree with what Michigan did in that situation, because you are in that spot. Alabama having to travel cross country. They've done it before. They've gone to the Rose Bowl. They'll go wherever they need to go. But I think that was a strategic play there by Michigan to play it in the Big Ten, Rose Bowl. That was a very strong connection, and have that situation be the first game. So strong play there. And the other one, Washington, Texas in New Orleans in the Sugar Bowl. That is going to be an offensive. I think it's going to be a fun offensive game. You're going to have 2 high-powered offenses, loaded up. But both defenses have shown to be very gritty and opportunistic as the season's gone on. Texas has gotten better and better overall through the season defensively. Washington, the way they've been able to limit and handle Oregon, USC, and all the other offenses out there in the Pac-12 this past year, it's going to be a fun one. And that one, 8:45 kickoff, it's going to be a late night on New Year's Day. So, pace yourself, because that one's going to be probably a 4-hour football game as well, and another fun one. But both these games, entertaining, have their little intricacies, and we'll dive into that when we do our preview. But I like the way it's set up right now.
Right. And a great thing for the University of Michigan, I agree with you about them taking the Rose Bowl. People don't realize how large the alumni base is. I mean, if you're a fan of the University of Michigan, you probably know this already, but they have one of the largest alumni bases in the entire country. It's bigger than Alabama's. And Michigan's alumni base does have quite a bit of money attached to it. They have over 450,000 living alumni right now, which is a huge, huge number. It's one of the more powerful alumni bases. And that's not even like the people that are casual fans who are fans of the Wolverines, but didn't go to school there, or they're just, fans, but they owned a car dealership and they got the money to travel to it. So that University of Michigan, they're going to do a great job of packing that Rose Bowl. I can't remember the last time that the Wolverines were out there in Pasadena. So I think that this is a great thing for them because they get to go out to Southern California. It becomes like a vacation type destination. And just like you said, Alabama's been there before. Does their fan base look at it and go, hey, it's just another trip, and they may save their money for the national title game? And I think I know the national title game will be much closer in Houston, but especially with how the Wolverines have fared the last 2 years in the playoff, I think that this may be something that we need to pack Pasadena to make sure we have the best advantage there. And then, Fresh, I thought the other matchup, I probably wish these two would have been broken up a little bit more. But, man, that's going to be a fun offensive matchup to watch. Ewers versus Penix. It's just going to be an entertaining football game. Like, that's just going to be a game that's going to be fun to watch. So,
And Sarkisian playing against the former team that he coached, because he coached the Huskies for a while before he went to USC. So this is also a little story there, a little added layer to the whole matchup itself.
All right, Fresh. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, not the Crimson Tide mascot, but Florida State being left out. And, we were watching I don't know about you, I was watching the graphic there as they were announcing the top 6 teams there. I knew Georgia was out. Like, it was down, in my eyes, Texas had done enough to get themselves in by boat racing Oklahoma State in the Big 12 title game. It came down to Florida State and Alabama. I don't think Georgia had a dog in the fight after losing to Alabama, but let's talk about that. Florida State, Alabama. We actually differ on this. We both sit on two sides of the fence. I'll let you go first here, Fresh.
Well, I think the first thing you brought up, the Texas part, that I think they boat raced for style points, but they were 7 or 8, and I think there were 7 in the rankings coming into this game, so they jumped up 4 spots by boat racing. But it's also, if Alabama doesn't beat Georgia, I think that the boat, that actually becomes a conversation of Florida State, Texas. But we aren't there. We got to move past it. The Jordan Travis injury, whether people like it or not, that has to come into play in the situation, because they were looking at the past 2 results. You went to Florida, didn't look exactly that crisp on offense. You won the game by 9. I get it, and then you play Louisville. You struggled. It wasn't the glitz and glam offense, but the defense was absolutely amazing and stalwart, and they shut people down in both games. It's just I think they looked at the product of, this is not the same team. Will they be able to compete? We don't want to have someone get blown out. The strength of schedule, being 55th in the nation, probably didn't really help them when they were compared to Georgia or Alabama in the end result. But they had beaten LSU. They beat them pretty handily in the first game of the year. But your second best win was Louisville, and I think the Louisville loss to Kentucky kind of hurt them a little bit as well from the perspective of the committee looking at it. It's like, that team just gave up 38 to Kentucky, and you only put 16 on them. Who knows what the committee is really truly going on in there, because at one point they validated Oregon being ranked just because Bo Nix's completion percentage, and that's the only thing they said with a straight face. So we we should have known this was going to come, where the committee was going to find some random thing and make it an issue. And unfortunately, Florida State is the one paying the price. If I was an alum, if I was a fan, if I was a player, coach, whoever, I'd be absolutely furious with what just happened. Anyone's going to be mad. Alabama fans are going to be mad. Texas, if they got left out for some reason, they would have been extremely irate. Georgia fans have their beef. Everybody has a problem right now with what happened. And that final spot has always been the issue. And always had controversy at that last position. Unfortunately, Florida State and the precedent here of being left out and being a 13-0 Power 5 conference champion, they hurt. I mean, if you look at Georgia, they're the first number 1 ranked team coming into the championship weekend that did not make the playoff. We've seen teams who didn't play for conference title games and jump into the 4th spot, but they didn't have the scenario like we had this year, where you had multiple undefeated teams coming into the last week. I feel for Florida State. I understand it, but the Jordan Travis injury was the deciding factor. And if they were in and they had to play a Michigan or Washington or Texas, I had a feeling that all of the offense could keep up and they might have gotten embarrassed. I think that's probably why the committee was scared. They didn't want to have a ratings issue. And it became more about TV and ratings than it did putting the team in. Unfortunately, Florida State had to pay that price. And now we're hearing, Jordan Travis putting out his, heartfelt message about, I wish I, hurt my leg weeks before so you could see how good this team was. And you're putting that poor guy in a situation to have to represent it now by the decision being made on him. That's not fair to him. The 12-team playoff is going to offer an opportunity, but what happens when we have that 11th team in the country? We're going to have some sort of scenario where that one team's going to be left out over another. We're going to have the same sort of situation, unfortunately. There needs to be exact, and you kind of hope there has exact criteria, but there's way too many opinions that get put in instead of exact stats or requirements that need to be made to attain a playoff spot.
Right. And Fresh, it was so fascinating for me watching this because our very first season of doing this podcast, we had one of the greatest rides during that time. And the main story that we had during that time was, we saw how great that Georgia team was to end the drought since the 1980s to win the first national title in over 4 decades. But the secondary story during that season was the Cincinnati Bearcats. And for those of you who don't remember, Cincinnati went in. They beat Notre Dame in South Bend very early on. The team was led by Desmond Ridder, who's playing in the NFL. They had Jerome Ford, who's playing in the NFL. They had all these guys, and it was this true underdog story. And we got towards the end of the season, and as we were moving through the month of late October, early November, Cincinnati did not look like the Cincinnati that was in the beginning of the season. They didn't look like the world beaters that they were. It felt like that there was like this equilibrium that was kind of starting coming back into balance here. And then that's kind of how I thought about with Florida State. I got into a plethora of pretty deep conversations with people in regards to Cincinnati. And my argument back at the end of the day is, did they do what you asked them to do? In and out, no matter what. Like the schedules were announced years in advance. They can only play the games in front of them. Did they do what they needed to do? And I always said, yes, they didn't lose a game. You can't punish a team. You asked them to go into a place like South Bend and win that game. You asked Florida State to beat LSU to start the season. You asked them to go into Death Valley for Clemson, beat them this season. And then with Jordan Travis's injury, I get it that they're a different football team, but what did you ask them to do? You asked them to go into the swamp and beat their rival with the backup quarterback. Did they do that? Yes or no? The answer is yes, they did that. Then on top of that, we recorded the episode before Rodemaker was ruled out with a concussion. We had no idea that was going to happen, that they were going to go with a third string quarterback. But what did we ask you to do? We asked you to win the ACC title game with the third string quarterback there. And just because it wasn't this offensive, like crazy explosion of points, and I get it, like he had 55 yards passing in the game. Florida State, and this is where I got like kind of bent out of shape listening to the talking heads. I go, Florida State adapted. And that's what I got to applaud them for, is that, right, we're without our superstar quarterback. What did we do? Okay, our backup went out. We knew this kid maybe wasn't completely ready. So what did we ask our team to do? We asked our defense to lead the way. And like that Florida, and that's the crazy thing. Like, Fresh, you have a really good point there. Offensively, I don't think that Florida State could go toe-to-toe with any of the other 3 teams in the playoff. Let's say we flip Florida State out with Alabama. They're playing the Wolverines in the Rose Bowl, okay? But I do think Florida State's defense matches up with all of the other teams. I do think that they would give a team like Washington fits. I don't know if that offensive line could with verse and everything and make like Penix would have to go back and harness like some of his Indiana days and be a scrambling quarterback. At the end of the day, wins and losses matter to me. If I was a committee member in voting, at the end of the day, and I get the argument that people are making, my argument would be Florida State did every single thing we asked them to do. We asked them to win every single game. That's all we ask you to do. Win every single game to look as best you possibly can. Alabama didn't do that. Georgia didn't do that. Ohio State didn't do that. Texas didn't even do that. And then I would actually have come down to Alabama and Texas. We saw that on the field. Texas has probably, I know people are going to argue with me about the Alabama and the Georgia victory right there, how that's the best win on the field. It's a neutral site conference title game. There's a bunch of film on the team. There's all that stuff. I will still argue with people that the Texas going into Tuscaloosa week 2 is the best win on the season. Hostile environment, tough place to play. I get it. Alabama wasn't the team. They started out the year pretty slow and developed into it. But again, I got to go by results on the field. Did you win? Did you lose? At the end of the day. And that's where I think Fresh and I different. And again, I don't, folks, when I'm saying all this stuff to you, I don't disagree with Fresh's point. I really don't. And I think that at the end of the day, when we're going to sit back and watch, we're going to see, I think we're going to see 2 really good college football games. I think this is going to be 2 really good playoff games. I just have a hard time doing when you ask a team to do everything and that they can control, and then you take when they do everything that they have control over, and then you take it away from them.
Well, it kind of makes you, what if we were watching Texas Oklahoma State and Texas just wins 27-10?
Right.
Is that now the wow factor of the 55 points, whatever they put up on them, is taken away and it looks competitive, but it's not dominant? They beat that Oklahoma State team, beat Oklahoma, but you lost to Oklahoma. So we go to the transitive properties of, well, where does that come into play? And then obviously that dominant effort then makes, with Alabama beating Georgia, and people start saying, well, they put up 55 in Oklahoma State and they beat Alabama by 10, but Alabama's won the SEC. And this is where we start playing that, conversation. If you want to talk about SEC bias, now I'm going to put this out there because we're going to hear that scream. If the committee really was SEC bias, they would have put Georgia in too. And they would have really just made the entire world just become rioters. But they didn't. Who knows what the committee was going to do? I think that the winning the football games truly matters, and they would have been great. I think they're worried about ratings. And someone made a great point earlier. I think the TCU getting destroyed by Georgia last year has them scared because people turned off that game or were not interested or left the game early and didn't watch the rest of it. And they worried about ratings and how it will be an impact for TV, because in the end, this is about money, folks. This is about content. We brought it at the very beginning. People want to watch. They want to sell ad space. They want to have the hype. They don't want to have blowouts in these games. In the past, we've seen a lot of playoff games where they've been blowouts and people got disinterested and turned them off early. They want competitive games, and I think that also sort of maybe hung in the balance of someone's mind of, is this game going to be boring? Is this game going to be competitive? And not actually looking at the body of work that has actually been done. And I think that's where that Jordan Travis injury unfortunately came into play. If it was a receiver, if it was a running back or a tackle or a linebacker, will they probably weigh as much? No. But the quarterback position and the way Jordan Travis was so special with that football team, made them play and look so great, they took that to heart. And it's very unfortunate that now has become a criteria meter of the eye of the roster, not just the end result of what they've actually done.
Right. And here's the wild thing, Fresh. I said this earlier during the off season, and when we were coming in to getting ready for a season, I could see the writing on the wall is that 2023 was going to be a very special season for a few reasons. One, I don't feel like there's a dominant team in college football. There's not this is like LSU with Burrow that one year. Like, there's no one beating that team. The Alabama team during the COVID year, that was the Georgia 2021 team. Again, I'll go back to the Ohio State 2014 team. I know that they weren't as impressive at times, but they were, once Zeke and all of them going rolling, that was a pretty dominant level team. I'm looking here, and I legitimately know I could make an argument. And again, Florida State may be, unfortunately, the one team I probably couldn't. But, like I said, with that defense, you might be able to kind of say, okay, if it turned into a defensive scrap match, maybe they could win a national title. I got 7 teams in my mind, though, 6, 7 teams that could win a national title. And that's the crazy thing about this. Like the Wolverines, Washington, Texas, Alabama, any of those 4 teams, if you tell me that they're going to be the national champion this year, I'm going to say I can see a path for that. Georgia would have gotten in. I could see a path for them to be a 3-time national champion. Ohio State. I thought that it was weird that they kept saying, Ohio State's only loss of the season is to the team that winds up being the number 1 ranked team. Granted, you don't get a play for your bowl game. It sucks because you're both in the same side of the bracket in your Big Ten title game. So
they didn't get that repeat like Oregon did. Have a chance to make up for it.
Right. So you look at these things, and all 6 of those teams right there have the talent in 2023 to be competitive. Florida State, if they have Travis, I would include them in there, no doubt about it. Defensively, that's where I would go. I would make a case for them, but then I would say they're the last of the ones that I'm making a case. Oregon, 2 losses, both to Washington. I think the game plan is out how to beat Oregon. It would be tough. I think Oregon's a fringe team there. And then I think after that, there's a noticeable difference between Oregon and everyone else. So again, Fresh, I think that we just saw an amazing year of college football. 24 is going to be interesting. We'll talk a little bit more. I got an idea of something that I'm going to be start working on for if we're doing a field of 12 here. But let's go over to the other New Year's.
Before we turn the page, there's one thing, a point you made that I want to follow up on. You mentioned the 2014 Ohio State team when Cardale Jones played. He was obviously not the starting quarterback. Right. People compared, Florida State got it. Florida State's getting deprived, but Ohio State got in. I think in that game, number one, Ohio State's a big image. Their AD was involved in the committee. It was new, but they still went out and hung 55 on Wisconsin in the title game and stole people's attention. Florida State didn't go out and hang 55 on Louisville with a backup quarterback. I think that is where that argument kind of gets away. You didn't have the attention grabber there.
Yeah, one other thing, too, about that, Fresh, too. Yes, they hung a 50 spot on Wisconsin, and Wisconsin scored nothing. It wasn't just the offense. It was a dominant defense. People forget how dominant that defense was, too. But it's a great point. It's a great point. So, all right, Fresh. Let's go over to the other New Year's Day 6 bowl games and take a look at those here. I'll roll through them, and I'm just going to go in order. On the 29th at 8 p.m., the Cotton Bowl, Ohio State is going to be facing off with Missouri. On the 30th in Atlanta, Georgia, in the Peach Bowl, Penn State is going to face the Ole Miss Rebels, and they will forever be known as Ole from here on out to me. I got stuff to say about the Ole Miss Rebels. On the 30th as well, in the Orange Bowl, Florida State versus Georgia, and January 1st for the Fiesta Bowl, Oregon versus, Liberty. I guess no other Group of 5 team wanted it. Liberty played, we shouldn't take pot shots at Liberty's strength of schedule. I'll let you take that pot shot.
Please.
The kid, Caden Salter played amazing football this weekend. We can't take that away from him. Liberty played nobody and had one of the worst schedules of all time. But
the 133 out of 133 in strength of schedule.
But Caden Salter was phenomenal. Let's start there. But yeah, Fresh, let me ask you this question. Out of the other New Year's Day 6 bowl games, which one are you, again, let's say, I know kids are going to opt out. It's the unfortunate truth of all of this. Let's say we're recording this on December 3rd. Opt-outs are limited. Which matchup are you going to say, this is going to be the most fun to watch?
Well, we're going to have a lot of opt-outs. You have guys in transfer portal not going to be playing. So the rosters are probably going to be very, underserved. The best matchup, I think, is going to be Missouri, Ohio State. Both those teams are going to be hungry for something. Ohio State's hungry to prove that they are legit. I want to see improvement from Kyle McCord or whoever the quarterback decides to be, if they go with Devin Brown, whatever. And then Missouri, They also want to prove something. They have a chance to play Ohio State and a big boy. What can they show up and do? Does Luther Burden play? Does that team actually show up? And that game, if they all play or those guys come out to prove, that's gonna be a fun one. I think Georgia, Florida State is going to be an interesting game. How does Florida State get motivated? How do you're at right now the lowest of the low. You're pissed off, you're angry, but you're also sad. You feel like you got something stolen. Georgia, how many guys opt out? Do they, who's motivated to play in this game? Because we've seen it before where teams that get that 5 or 6 spot, they just miss out. They don't really show up much in the bowl game because the half team's already gone, but half teams they're just so mad they don't care. So that's gonna be interesting to watch how those coaches Norvell and Kirby get their players ready to go in a month to show up and play in a big game. Because if those teams are actually even 80% capacity, even without opt outs, the depth on those rosters and what they can be is gonna be something cool to watch. Ole Miss, Penn State, I think is fun because I have issues with Penn State. You have issues with Ole Miss. Good defense for one, above average offense for another. How does that compare in Atlanta? And then Liberty versus Oregon. Bo Nix will not be playing. I'm telling you right now. I think a lot of Oregon players are probably going to opt out. So where does Dan Lanning in that depth actually show up versus a Liberty team that has everything to play for, and Oregon has nothing to win? If Oregon wins that game by not enough, people are like, you didn't blow them out. But if they lose, everyone's going to be laughing, just like kind of like USC last year with Tulane. So that might be like the just don't screw it up matchup. It's going to be interesting scenarios in all of the games.
Yeah, you can party New Year's Eve all the way up to where you wake up at around 3:30, catch the last 10 minutes of that game in the Fiesta Bowl. I get why we include the group of 5 teams. I do, but come on, man. And again, I wanted to start off with Caden Salter because the kid balled out and he deserves to get his moment in the sun. And I guess that's kind of what they're doing there and giving the kids 15 minutes of fame on a national stage. But man, Oregon is not going to take that game seriously.
No way.
We could see Liberty pull that upset just because they're like, Oregon's going to go down to Glendale and be like, we're here. Yay.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most intriguing storyline is going to be the Orange Bowl. Because I think if Florida State this game could go one of 2 ways. One, Florida State just packs it in. And they say, the heck with everything. Coleman I think Coleman can leave this year. Johnny Wilson, all of them can go, the heck with this. We're going to just leave this bowl game. We're not going to play in it. Whatever, screw you, college football playoff committee, and go down there and get the crap kicked out of them by Georgia. Or they could take another route and they could go hard in this game because Georgia, they don't have another reason to play for this game. They don't. I would be shocked I think Brock Bowers is out of this game easy. He's 2 top 10 draft choice here. He's already nursed that injury this year. He only has something to lose in this game. A couple of defensive players, I think, would have a difficult time. Florida State, in their mind, could go on. We go down and we beat Georgia in South Florida, and let's say we beat them by a touchdown or 10. And then you can point and go, look, and again, I know it's a meaningless bowl game where people opt out of, but Florida State then can go, look, you got it wrong. With our 3rd-string backup quarterback, look, you got it wrong. I'm going to be a huge Penn State fan because I can't stand Ole Miss and Lane Train over there because I think that they are one of the most overrated teams in this country. I really do know. And Judkins won't be playing in that game. So I hope Penn State boat races them. I think that's an intriguing matchup. Excuse me. I think that's an intriguing matchup in the Cotton Bowl there as we're watching with Ohio State. Only thing I'm worried about is how many of Ohio State players and how much of Missouri players opt out. I'll hold my judgment on that one because I would rank that number 2 behind Florida State and Georgia. But just like you let off fresh, Luther Burden, Maserati, Marvin Harrison, Abuka, Travion Henderson, Schrader might be heading to the NFL. I mean, that kid might as well hit it when you can. Defensive players, I don't know. That's an interesting game on paper, but I don't know if it's going to be there.
How about a rough day for Tulane? You choke. You have the championship game at your own place. You're playing SMU with a backup quarterback. You get beat, and then your coach goes to Houston, and
Right.
you're losing out on money in the New Year's Six. That was brutal. And then SMU, even your strength of schedule, your two losses to Oklahoma and TCU only have you one spot below Liberty. Like that doesn't bump you up. They've solidified. They actually, which I think we mentioned earlier, they care about the undefeated for Liberty on the worst schedule in the country, but the American two-loss conference champion who just beat Tulane is one spot below them and doesn't get to go. So again, the committee is not consistent. Questions everywhere.
All right. All right, Fresh. Well, that's our playoff recap episode and kind of reaction episode. Guys, one of our favorite games to record. Fresh and I are about ready to start working on that game. It's the Army-Navy game. It's America's game. It's the game where we get to celebrate both sides of the armed forces. It is an opportunity for us to really salute those who have served our great country. It is an opportunity for us to pay respect to the veterans, to the servicemen out there. It is just a fun game to do. It's something that, Fresh and I both have such a great deal of respect for members of our armed services that this is just a fun game for us to preview. It's one of our favorites. So before you head out, make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell just to get notified for that game, if not anything else here, folks. Want to send a special thanks to our producer, Drew. All season long, he's been running this behind the board. You guys don't get to see him very often, but he has done a phenomenal job all season long here. He's on the IR right now, so hopefully he's back and ready to go in the near future. But special thanks to him. Make sure you're visiting SpinnableSports.com. The Irrational Confidence Podcast is part of Spinnable Sports, so make sure you go to SpinnableSports.com. Fresh and I will be releasing our All-American team, maybe our best games of the season team. Maybe we'll go back and do why 2023 was a remarkable year. But we'll do all sorts of bowl previews, and then we'll start moving towards draft season. But we still got ways to go. College football's not done yet, but that's all I got here, Fresh. Leave us that 5-star review, because Fresh and I, we're those 5-star prospects.
Follow us on Twitter/X. Subscribe to everything. Be a part of it. Engage with us. We love your comments, whether you hate us or you love us. We love that engagement. It's been a heck of a season, and I got a feeling bowl seasons are going to be nuts. We're going to see some great performances, and then the NFL draft. Which of these players playing right now are going to change the NFL franchises of the future? So looking forward to that. Can't wait to break down Army-Navy. It is a special, special game, and we'll get that out to you very soon. With that, bye, y'all.